don't know if you're up there, big guy, but
Yeah.
if you are, I need some help here. I prayed out loud on my knees, first time in my entire life. And I remember it was the very next day, I went into work. That issue that I had somehow resolved itself. There's always the argument, well, Satanists don't worship Satan. It's like, it doesn't matter. He doesn't want you to worship him. He just doesn't want you to worship God.
Yeah, get as far away from God as possible.
Yeah, so it's like if you worship yourself, that works too. As long as you're not worshiping God, he doesn't really care. So I've definitely faced a lot of these challenges that Christians will face, where it's like there is a battle, like a constant spiritual battle. And it's a lot easier to believe the lies and to be complacent. It's a lot easier to be passive than it is to be bold.
God is making up the difference for you, because when he looks at you, he sees Jesus.
It was that moment, I'll never forget it, that I realized, no, just because my parents go to church or whatever's going on, there has to be something that happens personally between me and Christ.
We're on?
We're on.
All right, cool. So I had a couple things I wanted to address, and the first one, I kind of wanted to share a little bit of my story. Because I'm a newer Christian. I came to the faith a couple years ago now, maybe 3 years ago at this point. So I kind of wanted to share what that journey's been like for me, and give a little insight into the struggles that I've faced as a new Christian, and kind of give an overview of my background in faith. So,
well, real quick before you get started there, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Koty. Been coming to Grace Bible Church for almost 3 years now. That's right around the time that my wife and I were saved. We have been married a year and a half, roughly. We have 3 kids. Both of us had a child from a past relationship, so they're both 7 years old, which is great. It's like kind of like having twins. They grew up together. We've been together 6 years, married a year and a half, so they've known each other their whole life. And we just had a baby. It's today the 23rd?
24th.
24th, so he just turned 9 months yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, so just a little guy.
My son has a birthday today, so...
Oh, happy
Your son's birthday is today?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow. My birthday is tomorrow.
Oh, wow. Check that out.
Birthday central here.
I know.
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't bring me a card, Josh. It's okay, though.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I know Dan's birthday's coming up. I need to say something.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Sure. So, like I said, we're pretty new to the faith. Well, my wife was, her family kind of grew up Catholic. Okay. So she's familiar with the faith. She grew up kind of around it, but her mom ended up marrying someone who identifies as a pagan. So their household kind of drifted away from God, and, she felt the same way. So she had kind of like a coming back to faith story, whereas for myself, my parents, I would call them like passively religious. They believed in God, but never really instilled a ton of that value into me. So for a lot of my adolescence, I was atheist, and to the point where I was like anti-religious. I thought I was, I'm too smart for that. I don't need to believe in God, there's no proof, that kind of thing. And I would be very kind of vicious towards the people in my life who did believe in God, just thinking that, I'm smarter than that,
Yeah.
As I grew older, I kind of had this questioning phase where I was maybe agnostic, where we can't know, or maybe a deist, where it's like, well, maybe there is something higher than us, but I don't necessarily believe that there is a loving or caring God who interferes with the lives of humans, that kind of thing. I was also very politically liberal, so I was very left-leaning. I was on board with all the social issues, very outspoken about those things. And 2020 came around, the pandemic, everyone's familiar, and I saw a lot of the obfuscating that was going on in the media, and I started to question things a little bit. And as I started to question those things, my beliefs started to shift kind of more towards those traditional conservative values. So, I get a lot where it's like, oh, you're a Christian, that's why you believe those things. it was actually the opposite. I started to believe these things, and then I started to think, well, a lot of what I'm believing is it's stuff that it lines up with biblical teachings.
Can you give an example of a specific thing?
Sure, I can give you a ton. I was really on board with the LGBTQ rights. That was something that I kind of advocated for. And as I started to analyze the impact of that on society and how that was affecting us, I started to drift away from that, thinking, maybe there isn't a whole lot of benefit to endorsing or promoting this, especially towards the younger kids, things like that. Gender roles and, traditional roles in the home for a man and a woman, kind of the man being the provider, the protector, the woman being the homemaker, caring for the children, nurturing, that kind of thing. So my values kind of shift more traditional, and in that I started to open myself up a little bit. It's kind of like opening your heart to Jesus. I started to question a little bit, do a little bit of research. I was more open to having my mind changed in that way. I read a few pieces of pretty compelling evidence for the life of Christ, his followers, how they basically all of them were tortured or martyred. And that idea where it's like, would you be willing to be flayed or hung up on a cross to defend something that isn't true or something that to be a lie? And then some pretty compelling evidence for the Shroud of Turin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, which I thought always was like, oh, that's a fake, a medieval reproduction, that kind of thing. I won't get too far into it, but there's a lot of things where it's like the image on the shroud, it's like a negative image. It's something that they couldn't have possibly known during that time period. Then there's like organic material on the shroud that was native to that region at the time. It wouldn't have been in medieval England where they claim it was reproduced. It was like native to the Middle East in that region.
Yeah.
So when you think about your sort of social circle at that time, what percentage of the people that you knew or that you were close with would you say thought about these things? Because I would say that seems like not very many people who are left-leaning, or not even left-leaning, but like people who are not necessarily Christians. It's kind of like they don't really necessarily think about it. They just go, eh. And, so what percentage of the people you hung out with at that time or that you were close to would you say thought about these kinds of things?
0%. 0%. All of my friends were, a-religious at best, and a lot of them were atheist. I actually feel really terrible. I have a close friend of mine. His parents are very religious, and they are just a model couple, very Christ-like, and they raised their family in that way. And in high school, I played a part in pulling their son away from that. So I feel a lot of guilt for that, and he still lives that way. He's still an atheist. His parents are obviously still very strong believers. So, it was one of those things where it's like, well, why don't you think about this? And another friend of mine and we kind of drew him out of that belief system. So I definitely feel a lot of guilt for that. But
would you say that your relationship with him has changed since the past couple of years when you've come to faith?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, we're still friends. I still love the guy, and he's a great guy. I don't want to diminish him as a person, because he still has a lot of those values that his parents instilled in him. He's very loving and caring, empathetic. He lives a life that is Christ-like, minus a few, things where he's living in the world.
Sure.
But his character is good.
Yeah.
So I still think there's a lot of hope for him to come back to Christ. So
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I would love to play a role in that, to kind of, because I played a role in pulling him from the faith. So I'd love to play a role in bringing him back that direction.
Yeah.
So, as I was starting to analyze this belief system that I had and open my heart up a little bit to Jesus, there was a period where I was working and there was a problem at work that was really frustrating. Couldn't figure it out. And I remember one day I prayed. First time. First time. I was like, I don't know if you're up there, big guy, but,
Yeah.
If you are, I need some help here. I prayed out loud on my knees, first time in my entire life. And I remember it was the very next day. Very next day, I went into work. That issue that I had somehow resolved itself.
Wow.
And it was one of those moments that same kid, his parents, I told them this story, and his mom referred to it as an unmistakable encounter with the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
And I really love that, because it's one of those things where, as a non-believer, I would ask, where's the evidence? You have to show me something. I was looking for tangible, data.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of that where it's like, it's not something that you can show in that way. It's something that you feel.
Yeah.
And I just
experience it. Yeah.
Exactly. I kind of brushed that off like, oh, whatever. And then I felt it, and I was like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
It all makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's awesome that you describe it like that, because I think there's a soundbite that we're using for the intro, and that's, I think I'm telling my testimony where that comes from, but it's essentially like that is what we desire for so many people. Like, if you haven't experienced that, you have to have that personal encounter with God, and that's what makes all the difference in your life. So I love the way you articulate that.
Yeah, it's not about your parents' religion.
Right.
It's not about a dusty book on a shelf. It's not about a really cool philosophy that you might adopt, just like Buddhism or, this other thing, or psychology or whatever. It's an actual, related, relevant, personal experience with the Lord who is and is to come.
And that never gets old, hearing other people share that experience. I love that.
Yeah. It's since the beginning, his eternal power, his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that men are without excuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Powerful stuff, man.
Yes. That's good.
So, as with many Christians that first come to the faith, I was very bold once I had that experience and felt that in my life. I was very outspoken. We started looking for churches. We lived in Lansing at the time, and we had a couple of friends who started coming to Grace, and they were like, you got to come out here. We love this church. Great community, just come try it out. So we came out here and tried it out, fell in love, and we started attending regularly. It's a 45-minute drive for us from Lansing, and we were every single week coming out here just because, the welcome was so nice. Everyone was very, open arms. We're happy to have you here. Made us feel very welcome. So we started coming to Grace, and after about a year, they offered baptism. So my wife and I signed up to be baptized, and on the day of the baptism, I ended up having this disagreement with my wife over something that, in hindsight, was pretty small, but made me angry at the time. I remember walking outside and kind of sat down by the river for a little bit, stewing in my anger. I was texting my wife, something, whatever, just upset.
Yeah.
And I ended up walking away that day. So I left the church and started walking down 52 and just kind of gave up. People were telling me, hey, man, I had one of the elders at the church, Ken, he texted me like, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just wanted to let you know we're here for you. We love you, that kind of thing. I didn't end up going back that day, and I didn't get baptized. And it's one of those things where it's like, when you are in the favor of God, you also are in the favor of the enemy.
Yeah.
When you're not living for Christ and when you're not pursuing that, he has no reason to bug you, because his goal is to draw you away from Christ. So when you start pursuing him, that's when the target's on your back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after that, I had a period where it was pretty dark for me. I wouldn't say questioning the faith, but I wasn't living like I was before. I wasn't pursuing that fully. I wasn't spending time in the Word. I wasn't spending time in prayer like I had been. And so it was very difficult. And it's some of those roadblocks that you encounter as a Christian where, you have these setbacks and these hardships, and it draws you away from the things that you're supposed to be doing. In that period, right after I had been saved, I was praying every single day. In the morning, I would get in my car, drive to work, no radio. I would just spend time. Or if it was something on the radio, it was like, some sort of sermon or ministry, some sort of worship music, something like that. All of that kind of faded away for me a little bit. So I went on for quite a while like that, 8 months, something. And I started to feel that draw again. I had some friends in my life who were encouraging me to get back in the Word, to spend time with God, doing devotionals with me, things like that. So was feeling reinvigorated in that way, and I ended up being baptized last Easter,
Oh, wow.
which was a great experience.
Yeah.
Very, very, very powerful to have that on Easter. It
Yeah.
had a lot of significance for me. And I remember on the day of my baptism, I had, because we did it in the church, so I had to go grab like an extra pair of underwear or something so that I could, get into the pool. So I walked across the street, or had my wife drop me off across the street, grabbed that, and then I remember I walked back towards the church and then stopped at the river back behind the church.
Same place. Yeah.
So that was very symbolic for me.
Yeah.
It was like the initial, when I walked away, and then this time I'm walking towards,
Yeah.
coming back. So that was really big for me. Kind of one of those moments where it's like a nod from the big guy. It's like, it's like you walked away before, now you're coming back. And really beautiful baptism. The church was packed. Obviously, it's Easter Sunday. It's one of the highest attendance. I think it is the highest.
Yeah, it's
That
definitely
at
up there.
Christmas.
Yeah. Yep.
So and I'm okay with public speaking for the most part, but you get a crowd of 200 people, it can be nerve-wracking.
Yep.
But it was one of those things where I was locked in, the words were flowing super easy. I remember the only note that I had, it was a verse, be alert and of sober mind, your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion searching for someone to devour. That was the only thing I had written down, because I was like, I got to get this part right.
Yeah.
Everything else just came from the heart.
Wow.
Yeah. That's
See,
great.
I was present for that, and what I remember from that day was thinking, this is what church should be every week. Do you know what I mean? Not
Those
necessarily
personal
everybody getting baptized every week or
testimonies,
whatever, but it was like, I don't remember the exact words that were said, but I remember the look in your eye, and it was a little scared. But I just thought it was like nerves from speaking in front of people, maybe. Not scared. I don't know if scared's the right word, but it was just like ready, alive. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Feeling life. And
You can almost see people when they're public speaking like that, like they're doing an internal battle. Like, I'm overcoming what's the external to deliver something that's internal.
yeah. Well, that what I was going to say was that lended itself to the moment, because if
Right.
you would have came out polished,
Yes.
then it wouldn't have had the impact that it did, because it was like, here's this person, it's real, it's, you know what I mean, it's happening right now, and you're witnessing it, because we have this opportunity to make a public declaration of faith, you know what I mean? And so for that reason, it's like, it's almost in your benefit at that point to be a little nervous, because then you're like, this is just me being me. This
Yeah.
is what I've experienced. This is my relationship with the Lord, and you're going to see exactly what it means right now. And the devil waiting around to prowl around like waiting to devour you is such a critical verse, for all of us, really. If you're trying to be serious about your faith, you need to know that that's something you contend with. It's for everybody. I used to think like, I didn't really like when I first became a believer, when people would sort of see the devil around every corner. But the fact of the matter is, he kind of is. You know what I mean? He's kind of working in the lives of the people that are trying to forward the gospel, and people who are even people who are just trying to live their lives and do whatever. He's always, like you said, trying to keep your eye off the ball. And he really doesn't need your devotion. He doesn't need you to be his follower. He just needs you to keep your eye off the Lord.
Yeah,
and he's done his work if you're just thinking that you're doing it all, or if you're thinking that it's something besides God, or you're not leaning on God every second of the day, which I am, leaning on him every day, even if I'm not like behaving as such. I that's the fact of the matter, is I count on the Lord to make up my differences all day, all long, every day, all day, Yeah. And so, so that's such a critical verse. And I remember that moment was just really powerful. And I remember thinking, we should do this every week,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Just as an aside, there's this growing trend of Satanism that's coming up, where it's basically atheism plus. It's like the edgy atheism. And there's always the argument, well, Satanists don't worship Satan. It's like, it doesn't matter. He doesn't want you to worship him. He just doesn't want you to worship God.
Yeah. Get as far away from God as possible.
Yeah, so it's like, if you worship yourself, that works too. As long as you're not worshiping God, he doesn't really care. So it's kind of a trend I've been noticing, where it's like, this edgy atheism where it's like, well, look at the tenets of Satanism. It's like, put yourself first and, be passively kind to everyone else. It's like, yeah, that can be agreeable, but it's like, what is it telling you to do? It's telling you to be separate from God, to not understand the hierarchy of the universe, and to not be subservient to anything.
Right.
It's just, whatever I want, whatever my ego desires, that's what I pursue.
Yep.
So I've noticed that as a trend lately. But so
you got baptized.
And then, you have that same kind of revival feeling. But you always get these roadblocks, and, the enemy is always trying to put hurdles in your way. That's something we were just discussing in Thessalonians, where, he tries to trip you up. There's always going to be something, this voice in the back of your head whispering like, no, you can't do it. I experienced that a lot when I was going for my builder's license. I had a lot of apprehension in finishing that course and taking the test, where it was like, well, what if you fail? Well, what if you're not good enough? This little whisper like, oh, you're not going to be able to do it. And you buy into that sometimes because it's hard to put that aside. And so I've definitely faced a lot of these challenges that Christians will face, where it's like there is a battle, like a constant spiritual battle. And it's a lot easier to believe the lies and to be complacent. It's a lot easier to be passive than it is to be bold, So that's been something that over the years since I've came to the faith, that has been a real eye-opener for me, because you think, you come to Christ, life should be better. It should be easier, right? That's not the case. It's easier when you can just live in the world and basically do what you want. It's a lot harder to stay focused and to be convicted in your faith and to continue to do the things that the world is telling you shouldn't be doing. So that's kind of where I'm at with my story is, I'm feeling very convicted right now because I ended up pushing past that roadblock, that mental block of the builder's license. I just got that recently. And I remember after I got that, I was feeling so relieved. When I took the test, when she told me I passed, my hands were shaking. I went to the locker to unlock it, and I could barely get the key in. And on the way home, something in me was like, put some worship music on. So put the worship music on, and I was like, what is this feeling? I haven't felt this in a long time. It was one of the unmistakable encounters with the Holy Spirit. It's like, you can do it. You are capable. Look at what is possible.
Without a
God,
doubt.
So we run into these roadblocks where it's like, the enemy's trying to pull you away from the peace that is offered by Jesus. And that's something that we as Christians have to be very, very conscious about, and we have to be very deliberate to avoid falling into that trap.
Thank you for listening to the Life and Faith podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review on your favorite platform, and sharing it with friends and family. Your support helps us continue spreading the gospel of faith, hope, and love. Connect with us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many others to stay updated on our latest episodes. See the link in the show notes for all our social media channels. And until next time, it is our hope you'll commit yourself to an even deeper life and faith.